So this actually maps on well to the predicted pattern for enhanced activity for suppression later on. But here, what we're really interested in is what's happening when people are trying to implement cognitive reappraisal. Well, what we found was a region of the left orbital frontal cortex, a region that's been associated with assigning value or salience. How important is this stimulus, the content of the films, to me? Also, left ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, an area implicated in self-talk or linguistic processing. Remember that here, cognitive reappraisal is talking to oneself, speaking to oneself, and reinterpreting the content. And then also a medial prefrontal cortical area, an area that's been associated with self-focused attention, but also in this context, sending active inhibition, top-down inhibition from the medial prefrontal cortex to the amygdala. These three regions showed a very similar pattern of response across the 10 time points, but 15-second film clips. So here what we see is that suppression resulted in a significant increase only at the end, but that reappraisal seems to come online early, and then after selecting the strategy, saying it, and implementing it, you kind of ride the wave, so to speak, of having implemented cognitive reappraisal. So these three regions showed a very similar pattern of early activation followed by a general reduction in neural signal. So it does the work early and then kind of tones down. In contrast, for expressive suppression, actively keeping your face still, what we found here in the white circles were two regions in the right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex. These are two regions, BA44 and 45, that have previously been associated with actively inhibiting a motor response on what's called go, no-go tasks. So when one is trying to actively inhibit pressing a button, these are areas that come online that seem to be associated with volitional shutting off of motor responses. Here, what's similar is that these are the same trials when people are trying to actively inhibit using their facial muscles. Actively inhibiting showing any emotion through facial expression. And what we saw for watch negative, reappraisal, and then suppression is that the strongest signal in these two brain regions was again during the last 3 time points, the last 4.5 seconds, specifically for suppression compared to reappraisal, meaning that these are regions that come online at the end of the 15-second film clips, once the emotion has been generated and one is trying to actively inhibit facial muscles. So the reappraisal and suppression seem to map onto this early and late temporal onsets. In summary, reappraisal and suppression have different temporal onsets, early versus late. They had they were dissociated in the sense that they had opposing effects on at least 2 regions of emotion-related brain responses, amygdala and insula. Reappraisal resulted in reduction in negative emotion. Suppression had its primary effect on reduction of disgust facial expressions. And whereas reappraisal was primarily left hemisphere, suppression was actually mostly right and left. It was bilateral. So in summary, what I hope I've shown you is that when probing brain behavioral mechanisms, and specifically using disgust film clips, you can induce an emotional reactivity as measured behaviorally and neurally that then sends a signal upstream of threat, disgust, and activates different regulatory processes, in this study reappraisal and suppression, to then exert top-down modulation. When the system is working well, we can experience a wide array of emotions, not lose our emotional balance, so to speak, and be able to skillfully modulate, refine the emotion experience. The implications are that that timing of different emotions and different emotion regulation methods are important to look at. Different emotion regulation methods come online at different time points and have differential effects. The other very important implication in terms of interpersonal interactions or social functioning is what occurs when we are reappraising and when we are actively suppressing, both in ourselves and others. So some people in our lab have actually looked at this in terms of dyadic interactions and shown that intentional suppression of emotion causes increases in autonomic heart rate, skin conductance, respiration rate in another person who's listening or just attending to the person who's suppressing. So suppression influences not only the person who's doing the suppression, but influences other people's in very systematic ways. And then, very importantly, because really, finally, it's about the clinical application of these research studies, is what can a therapist do in the context of psychotherapy to train clients to be aware of when they are experiencing emotion recognition, awareness. Secondly, what are the effects of different types of emotion regulation strategies? When would they be most useful? And how might they affect other people around me? So I want to thank you for your attention, and please feel free to contact me to ask questions. Thank you very much.